and it's so nice to see everyone. Welcome. I'm Kim Hosen. I'm the Executive Director of Prince William Conservation Alliance, and we have several members here, which we should say thank you to all of you, because it's thanks to you that we can offer these programs free of charge. So we will send out a follow-up email and tell you a little bit more about the organization and how you can loop in. But we're really delighted to see you here tonight, and we're delighted to have Tom Eitler with us again. Tom is a county resident. He was formerly the chief of long-range planning in Prince William County at the time the Rural Crescent was adopted. And he's now a vice president for the Urban Land Institute. So he goes all over the world helping localities figure out how to grow smart and how to create vibrant, healthy, attractive, and desirable communities. So we are fortunate to have him here, and I'm just going to turn the program over to you, Tom.
Hey, thanks a lot. Can everybody hear me okay? Look good? Okay, fantastic. Thanks. This is, I think, the fourth time I've spoken to you. I will not be speaking about the Rural Crescent in this presentation, although somehow it's going to come up. I'm just sure it will. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. I have a presentation to make. I also want to say, Kim, I have the host disabled, the participant screen share.
It is?
Do I have to change that? Yeah.
Hold on.
Let me try it again here.
Yeah, because it says it's
You
okay.
should be good now. I just
Okay, I got it. Got it there. Let me see if I can get that up. I hope everybody can see that. I'm going to suggest if you want to move your group, your window over to the right or to the left, but we'll keep it this way. I wanted to talk about better suburbs, and I think this is a very important subject to the Urban Land Institute, and almost every panel that I've gone on in the last 15 years at the Urban Land Institute has somehow come across the idea of how do suburbs compete with cities? How do cities compete with suburbs, and so forth? And you know, for a long time, anybody who's been a resident of Prince William County knows we have a little bit of a reputation here. It's one of those situations where suburbs have they served a great purpose, you know, from the flight of the cities back in the 20th century. I grew up in a suburb. I grew up in Springfield, Virginia. I spent most of my life in Northern Virginia and suburban Maryland. But my approach here is going to be to look at Prince William County and what are the things that the citizens and the grassroots and the elected official groups can do to do a better job in design and in really looking at the issue of attracting and retaining talent, which I think is really the key to why successful suburbs. Let me just see if I can move down here. So I first have to apologize. I know that the announcement for this presentation was a little snarky, and I didn't want it to be that way, but I wanted to get everybody's attention because, again, I say I grew up, and it's easy to criticize suburbs. It's an easy thing to do. I don't want to make it easy. Prince William County is a great place. It still has great value in its land. It's got an exceptional school system. It's close to the influence and power of DC and Arlington and Fairfax, and it's got a great interstate access. You guys know this better than I do. It's significant. The growing bus and rail access that's continuing to grow. It's got a reliable power source, but growth is coming, and growth is coming. The path of the demographic arrow is facing Prince William County. But it also has a great diversity in its citizenry, both race and culture and ethnicity. But I think we're on the cusp right now. There's a lot of things that are happening. We're getting out of COVID. The economy is doing very well. As everybody knows, the housing industry is doing gangbusters, and especially in a place like Prince William. I'm not sure that's going to continue the way it has for too much longer, but it is important. But we're on the cusp, and I think that the thing that I want to get to and why we want to have better burbs is because I think we have a reputation issue. I think Prince William County has been seen as a suburban county. It's perceived by many to be, boring and vanilla and listless. Listen, I live here. It's not. I know that it's not, and I think most of our citizens know that. But I think the perception in all the people that I work with in DC and the people who live in other places in the Washington area, when you talk about Prince William County, there's a certain thing that comes to their mind, and it's not, hey, this is the most dynamic place in the region. I think the elected officials are right now excessively focused on pleasing landowners and overly absorbed on this issue of equity, and a wrong solution for that. And that's all I'm going to say about the rural crescent in this presentation. I don't think they're thinking about the long run, especially as it refers to the development area, to the areas of Woodbridge and Manassas that have most of the development and have most of the potential for growth and development. And I don't think there's a perception that the community has convinced themselves that what we're doing is good enough. You know, this is fine. This is what we need. This is what we have to get. And it's a perception only. I'm not saying that this group or any individual here thinks that. I'm just saying that's the perception that I think is out there. So I want to switch for a second to some decisions that were made fairly recently. And I call them dumb density decisions. No, I know a lot of people were involved in this decision, but a place that I felt is I came through the development process with Prince William County. One of the places that we could have afforded to have a lot more density and a lot more mixed use, and we got 5.8 dwelling units per acre. And it just sort of reinforced my concept that the county, the staff, the elected officials, the selected officials, the citizens were not thinking strategically about what we needed to do. I'm going to stop for a second and go all the way up to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh and its economy has nothing to do with what we do in Prince William County, but the story here that I want to get across, and I'm going to ask a question in a minute. By the way, we have 3 questions to ask you guys. But Pittsburgh's known now as sort of this, how do you take a city that was a Rust Belt city and change it to the new economy? It's got new stadiums. It's got universities like Carnegie Mellon and Pitt and Duquesne and Point Park. It's got Uber, Google, Apple. It's a magnet for tech companies right now. And it's successful, and especially in the robotics because of Carnegie Mellon. But in general, these kind of technologies and the people that they need to employ to work at these places are going to Pittsburgh because that's where they want to be. And that's where the companies are going. They're actually now going to where the talent is. The reason I bring this up is Pittsburgh has 90 neighborhoods, and 9 of them are doing very well. You've heard of them before: the Central Business District where the stadiums are, the South Side Flats that has the new development down there, Oakland, Highland Park, East Liberty. These are places that are examples of where Google and Uber are going. But 81 of the neighborhoods are just like they were before. The point I'm trying to make here is those 9 neighborhoods in Pittsburgh have carried the city's reputation over the last 20 years. And those 9 neighborhoods made it the most successful Rust Belt city to change to the new economy. And this dynamic, we need to know about this dynamic, what people think of and how they think about a place. This dynamic can also work in reverse. And so you go to, and I'm not picking a particular place, but a place like Chicago, which is a very successful, much larger scale city. But it has a few neighborhoods that are not doing too well. And in the news, people think about those neighborhoods that are, have the crime and what they are. So I think Prince William needs to start thinking about this. I look at it as more of the positive approach. If you can get a couple of places that really catch people's imagination, you can change the dynamic about how people think about Prince William County. We ought to start demanding excellent quality in all the development that comes through. I know that's tough under Virginia law. I know it's difficult under the enabling legislation. I know it's difficult under the political situation, but we ought to start doing it. And we ought to stop just accepting anything that's being proposed. Now, I'm going to shift real quick here, but before I do that, let me go back to, we had a question, and I just wanted to put the first question up, Kim, if we could.
Oh, wait, before you do that, we had a question on the chat of about Pittsburgh, which you might want to answer now. How equitable has a change been in Pittsburgh?
Not as equitable as you would think, but also Pittsburgh has a extremely tiny Hispanic population. It's got a big Black population, a big African-American population, but I think the person's making the point. The Hillside neighborhood, Homewood, the neighborhoods that I know very well where we've gone and done work, these are places that haven't experience the equity that you would think would come with just the technology. But I say that with the understanding that Pittsburgh still has a reputation of attracting really high-end talent, and it has an attraction to research. You know that the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center is one of, I think, the largest single recipient of federal grants in the entire country as a medical center and as a big research university. That's not because they just happen to know how to write grants. That's because Pittsburgh and its associated universities all know that this is an important thing for them to think about what their reputation is. But it's a good question. No, the Homewood neighborhood, which I'm very familiar with and did a panel there just a couple of years ago and met a lot of the people there, they feel left out. And they're not one of the 9 neighborhoods that's doing well. But let me ask you this question as a person not from Pittsburgh, maybe. Have you ever heard of Homewood before? Probably not. And it's, I think it's an interesting issue of urban, psychology and urban economics that you have to think about when you're thinking about economic development, how that happens. I would say this. I know the former mayor of Pittsburgh very well. They took a lot of chances to get where they got today. He was a mayor for 12 years, and it all started in his time frame, and they've continued that way. And you would hope that the 9 neighborhoods soon becomes 10 or 12 or 15 of the neighborhoods, and that you could see that improvement happen. But in any event, do we have more chat questions? Let's see. I went to see him.
No, that was it. I think that.
Oh, okay.
That just was so specific to Pittsburgh. I didn't want to wait till the end.
Yep. Fine. Okay. Yeah. So we had a question that was coming up. Let me just see here.
Are you ready for me to launch that now, Tom?
Yeah, go ahead and launch that. This is a loaded question, just by the way, a loaded question, but go ahead.
And you can answer more than one. So of the following, what is the most important to you as a citizen business owner in Prince William County, Northern Virginia?
Can everybody see that? I can't.
I can see it.
Okay.
So go ahead and lock in what your choices are. We have quality of life, leisure opportunities, weather, family, friends, neighborhoods, employment, cost of living, my house. Are people not? Okay, there we go.
My submit is not working. I'm clicking on submit, but it's not working.
Huh.
You'll have to answer the second ghost question, and then you'll be able to go ahead.
Oh, I accidentally hit the, sorry about that, folks. I accidentally hit the add another question. So yeah, number 2 is a ghost question. Thanks for that insight.
Yeah, I'm trying to hit submit on question 1 and it won't take it.
Yeah, so if you have to answer 1 and 2.
Scroll down, Jack.
Oh, and 1 and 2.
So what does that mean? Untitled question. I don't know what the option 1 and 2 is.
Oh, you can't answer them both. You can only answer one of them.
Yeah, but what does it mean?
What does it mean?
I don't think it means
that
anything.
I accidentally added a question to the poll that shouldn't have been there.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean anything, right?
Yes, it doesn't
Okay,
mean anything.
Thank you. No problem. No problem. That's fine.
Okay, that worked.
Looks like there's a couple folks still answering, so I'll give you just a second more since. All right, now I'll share the results and pass it on to you.
Well, that's interesting. So let's see. So quality of life came up number 1. Option number 1 under the untitled question 1. What a surprise. Let's see. So leisure opportunities, family, friends, politics, equity, fairness. When I put this together, I just wanted to get a feel for, why would you be in Prince William County? Well, why be here? And I think people who, like me, who've been here for 28 years, and I know people like Jack who've been here even way longer than that. It is a big part of our life. We feel like there's a great quality of life. We love the woods. We love the streets. We love the people. so all of them are in there. All right, I just wanted to get you guys sort of thinking about that as, why Prince William County means something to you and why you're here. I'm going to continue with my presentation here. And the next slide that I have is, let's see, gotta go here. There we go. So I want you to take a chance to look at our Urban Land Institute website. We did a research project about 3 years ago, Shifting Suburbs, and it's all about reinventing infrastructure for suburbs for compact development. And it was around the issue of the increasing appetite of the young population, the people that are getting out of college and getting out of school now, the Y generation, even the Z generation now, who have a desire to be in a high density area with mixed use and a mixed racial makeup, who are looking for transportation options, including transit, walking, and biking, not just a car, not just a single family home or a townhouse on a detached lot. And the whole idea was suburban places have really made an effort, and they've started to do this all over the country, and they've done it in Prince William. They've certainly have done it in Fairfax, Montgomery, and Loudoun, about reimagining what they look like from a typology and from a design perspective, and doing it in a way that is more compact, more sustainable and more resilient. Some of the things that came out of that were trying to identify suburban development types, and I just have the list here. Every one of those development types, the ones that we came up with, are in Prince William County. The suburban mall, the transit-oriented development, although that's a very small part of the county, but certainly suburban arterials and commercial corridors and suburban town centers, that's kind of what Prince William County is. So each of those has certain solutions. And I think the key to that is these winning strategies that we identified. One is partnerships. How does a civic association partner with the county staff? How does a county staff partner with the developer? How does a developer partner with its financing? How does the elected officials combine with the staff to make the right decisions? Partnerships are key, and there's a whole breakdown of how partnerships work and how they can be better utilized. A comprehensive approach to infrastructure and access. I think when we were putting that together, the idea was you have to have a plan. Every jurisdiction does, but you have to have an approach that has a feeling about where you want to be at some point in the future. And I think Prince William County has that. I think it's in the current comprehensive plan. I'm not sure it might be in the new comprehensive plan, but in the current comprehensive plan, the idea was we want to spend our money in the locations on the infrastructure in the places we think it should go. And that's the main reason why the comprehensive plan has the divide between rural and urban. There's also an issue about programming and place management. I wish I could say, and I know it's not the case, but at say Potomac Mills Mall, where not the property owners coming together, but the entire area coming together under one programming piece. Now, I'm not saying ownership and how much money they make and how they share funds or anything, but someone who is regularly thinking 24 hours, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day about programming for that area. I don't believe that's happening right now. That's one of the winning strategies that can change how people feel about an area. Public spaces, proactive planning, stakeholder engagement. And then I don't think that the county really does, and I don't think the development community really does take advantage of all the sources of funding that's out there. There are a huge number of state programs and federal programs, especially for things like trails and for rails to trails and recreational activities. So those are some of the winning strategies. I encourage you to take a look at that. I'll make sure we get the website up for you for that. I believe it's a free publication. Some of the stumbling blocks are there, right? Trouble working across boundaries. And I think this was mainly across jurisdictional boundaries, but in a place like Prince William, I can see it, trouble working across boundaries, even like magisterial districts, or between civic groups, or between, say, county staff and service authority staff, those kinds of things. Funding is always an issue, although I think it's less of an issue in most cases. The skill set is definitely an issue in Prince William County. Do we have the political, the selected leadership, and the professional leadership, as well as the citizen leadership that has a skill set to try to get through these things? Entitlements and zoning are a problem everywhere, and then community resistance. And I think part of that community resistance is first understanding the problem and then communicating the problem. And I'll get to that in just a moment on some other items, but that's always going to be a stumbling block, but it's definitely solvable. There's another website that I'm going to encourage you guys to look at, and that's called Building a Better Burb. It's actually was started by the Congress for New Urbanism. And while I think all of the goals and the ideas and objectives of the Congress for New Urbanism make a lot of sense and can be applied here, I don't know if they're the best ones to bring that out. They come off even worse than I do on being very snobby and snippy about how things happen. But they are a good source of information. And this website is great. I'm going to run really quickly through some of the things that they think are important. And they have, I think it's 7 steps that they have, these tools that begin this process. Tool 1 is the beginning. Some suburbs don't even realize they're suburbs or don't understand how they can change things. And I think looking for a solution, you really have to get specific. You can't apply to the whole 350, square miles of Prince William County everything that you might want to do. You got to start picking digestible and focused areas that you can do this on. So specific locations can make a big difference, and that's the beginning of this. Second one is finance. Everybody knows, people live in Prince William County, but oftentimes they're working in downtown. The jobs that would supply the jobs for the people living in this county aren't here. We know that we want to have more jobs here. We want to have more employment here. So that's one of the more difficult issues. So you have to work on the finance issues, and there's a whole set of recommendations in this tool. Leadership's a big one. And I think that sometimes, as it says here, better burb falls victim to raw politics. And, better leadership is a big deal. Grassroots organizing, I think you've started that process. You've had it going for quite a while. It may be fragmented. I think that Kim's group and, the Conservation Alliance, all you guys are members. This is a big organization that's countywide, but I think you need to also have other organizations that try to connect, the local pout with the civic associations from other places. And there's other groups that are out there, but grassroots organizing is very important to that. Cultivating consensus, which is part of that grassroots process, making sure stakeholders are involved is important. And then infrastructure design. I have not looked at the design and construction standards manual for some years, but my recollection is that they have some fairly straightforward, different types of like in roadways, they have several rural sections and several urban sections. Not a lot of consideration, I think, this is going on almost 20 years ago, but not a lot of consideration for the kind of things that you need for building better suburbs, especially with regard to pathways, bikeways, and what we would call road diets. Although I know they've made some changes to the DCSM recently, that's an important part of it. You've got to have the codes in place that allow you to do the kinds of things that would improve connectivity and improve the trail systems. And then awareness, which is just basically being able for groups like you to articulate to the Board of Supervisors, to the Planning Commission, and to other civic groups out there, all of the details associated with building better burbs. So I have that link in there. I think it's definitely worth looking at those tools. There's a whole set of strategies under each tool and how you can approach them. And my guess is you're going to go through this list and you're going to find that you are doing some of these, and then some of them you haven't thought about before, and some weren't even on the radar. And I think those ones that aren't on the radar are the ones you guys need to look at. So I'm going to get into some of the sprawl retrofit tools here. And, these are just the beginning of some of them. I'd like to go through a couple in some detail. One of them is you do have to have housing choice. Everybody has a housing affordability and a housing attainability problem right now. There's not a jurisdiction in the US or in Canada, for that matter, right now that isn't going through the issue of housing being too expensive. And it's affecting the ability to grow and grow in a way that you want to. So you have to start thinking about different typologies. We in general in Prince William County have 3 types of units. We have our single family detached unit, we have our townhouse or row houses, and we have apartments. And there's different versions of each of those. Some are condos and some are rental and those kinds of things. But there are an awful lot of other kind of middle, what we call missing middle housing, triplexes, quadplexes. Back in the you know, the 70s and 80s, I think there were a number of places around the county that were trying these different pieces out. They never kind of caught on. For builders and developers, I think one of the issues is they know what they know how to do. They know how to do townhouses, they know how to do single family homes, and they're starting to get a lot better at doing multifamily in a manner that makes sense. But they ought to start thinking about other types. And I'm going to suggest one in particular, and I know this is going to freak people out when I say this, because when they see factory built, the first thing they think of is, oh, we've had this problem back in the 80s. We don't want mobile homes. But factory built cottages and cottage communities are one of the things you can do, and it sort of kills two birds with one stone. One is it deals with the issue of quality, because you get real quality with these cottages, and you also get a single family home, but you also get something that the neighbors know. They know what a cottage looks like. But the price issue is the key here. Is you can build the unit for a lot less. You, of course, are going to have to change parts of the code. You have smaller lots and so forth, but a cottage community can be a good way to get density into an area without putting in an apartment building or something that you may not be used to, like a triplex or a quadplex. So I'm going to suggest you look at that. I don't have it here on the presentation, but there's a group out of Oregon called the Cottage Company, and they have some standard cottage types that they design. There's other companies that do that. They're the ones I go to because they got nice, pretty pictures of them. And they've applied that up and down the West Coast, and it's worked very well. They've gone into communities and raised the density from 4 units to acre to 10 units per acre. And you look at that community, it looks like a single family community, but they're going at 10 units per acre. So I think that is one of the kind of units that the county needs to consider, and it would make a huge difference on typology and the feel for what the county has. I think for every plan that comes through the rezoning and the site plan process, you really need to think about future connectivity and adaptability. I was telling Kim earlier a story about one shopping center in the county, I won't name it, but when they were trying to redo the parking lot and put in some more uses that were there, and one of the things that stopped them in the middle of their whole process was, oh, we have a utility line here. It happened to be a Virginia power line, or is their connection to the Virginia power line. And it went right through the parking lot. And their position was, well, we just can't afford to dig that up and take it out. We're going to have to work around it. And if they had just thought earlier about, and Jack's looking at me probably like, remember the joint trenching systems, and all those things. But it really was very important that if they had just thought about earlier on about how they might adapt their parking lot to fit into, to accommodate future growth, it wouldn't have been the problem that it was. So that's important. And also future travelways. Think about future travelways. I'm going to show you a picture in a minute of the shopping center at at the Parkway and Minnieville Road. And, you can see how it could fill in with some good urban development at a little bit higher density in a place that can accommodate that kind of growth right now. Green streets are another thing. There's probably communities where you could actually go in and turn over some of the streets that are totally for vehicles right now into green areas. That has both an environmental as well as a transportation impact. Environmental repair. There shouldn't be a stream in this county that doesn't have some kind of natural filtration, bioswales, some kind of an approach to carrying water. Instead of just looking at a concrete, retention area or transporting the water to someplace, there's a whole lot of information in the book about environmental repair from the Urban Land Institute, and especially about natural filtration and bioswales and depaving. That's the other thing is, I don't want to hear from anybody that Prince William County doesn't have enough parking. We have got enough parking to accommodate everything we have. And the retailers who say I need it for Christmas or I need it for whatever it is, I don't buy it. I've gone around the country and seen a lot of different communities, and they have much lower parking standards than you would have here. And we don't need the parking. The problem is that's sort of the retail, the re-tenanting of properties is such that you have to have the parking to convince the retailer to go in because they want the extra parking. And everybody doesn't need to park right next to the door. So that's another place I think depaving has to be a real focus for the group over the next couple of years here. Reusing the box, this is a picture of Marumsco Plaza. There's a lot of information in both that website that I mentioned, as well as the publications at the Urban Land Institute about how large suburban floor plates can be reused. Everybody thinks that has to be reused for commercial, but it could be reused for mixed use, or it could be reused just for residential. But there's a lot of opportunity also, and this is going to freak people out, but I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of industrial space. I know it's valuable space for the uses that are there, but it may be in a location, especially like something like Featherstone Road, that is right next to a commuter commuter rail station. And there should be some consideration given whether they can reuse some of the boxes that are there. So that's another option. I think you have to optimize urban form. And in this case, you need to transfer some of the automobile-oriented places to walkable, bikeable streets. That's not going to be possible all over the county. I recognize we have a lot of big curvilinear streets, but some of the new development coming in ought to be thinking about that. And in particular, to try to connect the trails for the entire county to the extent that they can. There ought to be interconnectivity, and that includes putting trails in commercial areas and office parks and industrial parks. I know that's an anathema to an industrial developer. They want their site with their chain link fence around it and so forth, but making the connectivity between the trails so that I can get on my bike here in Woodbridge and I can ride out to, Vint Hill Road and go up to the brewery at the two silos there. That ought to be done without having to cross too many roads and not having to figure out where walk on a road that is not made for biking or for walking. They also, as you go through the new development coming in to this county, especially in the eastern county, but also in the west in the 234 corridor, you ought to be thinking about walkable block sizes. Now, I have a question mark in there. It says walkable blocks should be less than X number of feet. If you talk to an urban person, they're going to say 500, 700 feet maximum. Other people are going to say 1,500, 1,800 feet. It's probably different for any place, but Prince William County is going to have to figure that out. My guess would be under 1,000 feet makes a lot of sense. It probably should be even smaller than that. And they also need to look at a publication that that the Urban Land Institute has for the economic power of walkability and what it means. I think you're starting to experience that in places like Woodbridge, especially that North Woodbridge small area plan that's being looked at. And to the extent that you can connect after the interchange goes there to the Belmont area, I think those are the kind of places where the economic power of walkability is going to be evident. You got to think about new liners and creating passages through large commercial buildings. And I'm going to switch real quick to the next slide here. I think everybody knows where this is. This is Minnieville Road. This is the Parkway. This is the new Quartz development that I think it's called, and the Mitch Phelps property. And this is the shopping center across the street with the Fridays. And all of these areas here along the edges of the roadways, they ought to be thinking about how to do liner buildings, similar to what's across the street. Now, what's across the street is designed well and it looks good in the urban form. It doesn't have the uses that you would want in there, but that's because it started off as a residential community and pretty much is an age restricted as well as residential. But this has a lot of opportunity, and this kind of shopping center replicates itself all over the county. And you ought to be thinking about how to convince the development community and the owners of these shopping centers to cooperate and partner to get more square footage in here, and to even think about the residential that could perhaps go in here. So this is the one I wanted to concentrate on. And I just don't know where this stands. Someone probably can correct me here about where the Quartz development stands. And when I first looked at the pictures of it, I was kind of blown away. I said, here's the kind of stuff you ought to be looking at. It's everything I was talking about. Well, you've got, bioswales, you've got a lake, you got all this public area. But then I looked at some of the other pictures, and then I got to the site plan, and I was dumbfounded by this site plan. I am criticizing Lassard. I know that group, and they have great designers and good urban planners and landscape architects. And while I don't have a problem with trying to buffer the existing community from the residential here, and that makes a lot of sense. I don't know what those look like. I would certainly be looking at that as higher density cottage type units. I think that's what I saw in another plan that they had. What I can't accept is building the same thing across the street that I just showed you, which is a bunch of parking up on the big roadways. This ought to be lined. They ought to be moving this square footage out here or putting more square footage in here. This is where they ought to be putting an edge to it that gives it a better feel for it and is actually going to be more marketable to the kinds of people who we want to attract to the county, which are these young, entrepreneurial, tech-savvy young people, the Y and the Z generation. Yet they've built another suburban center. And while some of the design I think makes a lot of sense, I think they also ought to be looking at connecting the public through here to Minnieville Road. The public park ought to be public space that is in here. And whether it's owned by the developer or owned by the county, I don't know. But you can't just say, well, use our sidewalk, but then when we want to close it, we can close it. This needs to be extended, and they need to redesign this whole area here. This is going to be one of the most visible and the most prominent new developments in the county. And it's going to, you know, for 20 years, it's going to say, here's what we are. And I look at that and I say, you know, you really need to work on that. So Jack, I think you've already been working with them, but you need to get to work with these guys because they need to do a better job. It doesn't do it for what you want this county to be.
Thank you.
Yep. So let me just finish with a couple of other things. You have North Woodbridge. You have Featherstone Plaza in the Route 1 corridor. You have the piece next to, I think this is in Brentsville or Gainesville, I can't remember. This is next to the Manassas Mall. You've got the piece down at 234 where it tees into Route 1, which is the old Skip's Junkyard. You've got the pieces up and down Blackburn Road and the Absco Road. These are just a couple of places I used in one of my last presentations. These are ripe for this opportunity to reconsider how these places can be constructed. And I want the folks on this call to understand it's easy for me to sit from the outside. You guys are dealing with this every day, but it's easy for me to sit outside and criticize this stuff. But I want to give you some ideas about what you can do. And I would be totally willing to work and find the right people to help work with you, work with the landowners, work on consolidating properties, work on redeveloping properties. It's hard. It's very hard to do. And I put this little chart together that I think says something about what we're doing here. And that is, you got to recognize that infill development and redevelopment is difficult, much more than the greenfield. And that's why you have this pressure now out in the rural areas, because it's just too hard to do it. So let's just go out to where we can do it. And I have two concerns, number of concerns, but two concerns right up front. One is, yes, it's hard to do, but it's the right thing to do. And the value of that property is going to go up dramatically if you do the right type of redevelopment and infill development there. The second one is, I'm afraid if the county thinks that we don't have to worry about the Route 1 or the 234 corridors, we'll spend all of our time out in the rural area or at the edge of the rural area, and that's where all the effort is going to be spent. That's where all the planners and the planning office are going to be. That's where Jack and other groups like his are going to be spending their time, because that's where the action's going to be. And what's going to happen to the Route 1 corridor and the Absco Mills and 234, people are going to forget about it. There's not enough people working at the county to work on all this stuff. And they're going to be focused on the place where all this action is going to be happening. And no one's going to think about, what do we do to reinvigorate the Route 1 corridor? So I think you should put together, number one, you got to get the commitment of the county elected officials. They're the most important people out there, and the staff and the citizens to work together, that this is a commitment for them, that they want to do this. Number two, you got to include incentives for the development community. You can't do this and say, well, you got to pay the same amount and do this. Real priority processing, real density bonuses, a strike team from the staff and from the development community to make these things happen and to get to the issues of NIMBY, or yes, in my backyard, the YIMBYs, and then also a reduction in offsite improvements so that this makes it economically feasible for the development community to consider. And then the third suggestion I have is just get started small. As I said earlier, don't try to do the whole county or don't try to do a whole corridor. Pick a few sites that make a sense and get a few of these under your belt first, and then it would work. The economic development and housing goals of the county will be met. You can recreate places today that citizens and workers of the future are going to want to be, and you're going to remake the image of the county. And I think that reputation issue goes away and we become this new place that people want to be. The design and the typology from that perspective, it'll change that dramatically. So I have another question. I think question number 2, we'll do both question number 2 and number 3, and then I'll close.
Okay, I'll launch that now. Of the following, what is one thing you really hate about new development in Prince William County? Select one. You have traffic, architectural design, county regulations, citizen opposition, lack of choice, variety, cost to taxpayers, purchase price, impact on the environment. Select one, and then I'll share the results. Give folks a couple more seconds. There's a few still trickling in. Okay, I'll end the poll.
The Conservation Alliance. Good. It makes sense. It makes sense. You know, it's interesting that, just a thought, with that, traffic is the second, but it's not as big as I thought it would be. And what is very interesting is the cost to the taxpayers and the lack of choice, I thought would have been larger. But impact on the environment in many ways, I mean, these are not mutually exclusive ideas, right? I just kind of thought up ones that might get people kind of going on this. There could have been a dozen more in there. Okay, that's good. I'm going to, let's see here. I've got one more slide. So I'm kind of reiterating what I said earlier. And I hate to go back to Pittsburgh, but I am. 9 neighborhoods made or are making the reputation of Pittsburgh. I think 9 locations or 5 locations in Prince William County can make the reputation of this county. We don't have those locations now, although there are some really, really nice developments in Prince William County, but they are not going to share, they're not going to carry the load that we need to carry here, which is how do we present a community that cares about its environment, that cares about economic development, that cares about racial equality, that cares about what design looks like and cares about its kids and education, if you don't have the place for them to say, this is the example of what we want to see. So I just think that there's a couple of, I think there's just a handful of good developments can substantially change this county. I think what's happening up in North Woodbridge they'll be busting down the doors. If that's successful and it does well, the development community and the people who want to invest in Prince William County are going to be busting down the doors to get there. They might be doing it anyway, busting down the doors to get here, but in a way that is not about what the quality is, but it's an easy mark to go down and build your houses or build your buildings to do what you want to do. So I just want to encourage the Conservation Alliance and the citizens of the county and the elected officials and the selected officials to think about this. And I also want to make one more plug here, and that is don't leave the development community out of this. They need to be a partner in this. I think you've got a handful of, not all of them, but a handful of developers out there who are really willing to figure out how to do this. And they need the encouragement of the citizenry and the elected officials that they're going to be partners in this as opposed to opposing them all the way along the road. So I hope that helps somewhat. I think there's a lot of questions that are out there. I don't know, Kim, how you want to start doing the questions, or if you want to, I'd be happy to try to answer some questions.
And right, we have questions and the community conversation is open. If you would like to say something, you can raise your hand, which I think is under the participants tab. Is that correct? Or you can wave around or start talking. I don't see any questions. I see lots of interesting comments in the chat.
Okay.
And maybe go for it, Lori.
I have just kind of a comment and some questions. Independent Hills Small Area Plan, where we're asking for a centralized hub and community. And we are working with the developer who's receptive and trying to work with us. But when we're saying, hey, we want a plaza, we want a centralized green space, we want somewhere where kids can have ice cream on a bench and not be on a sidewalk next to a parking lot. Now, here I go with my ice cream again, Martin. But anyway, he's like, oh, we just can't do that, you know. And so we have done all these charrettes, and we've gone A, B, C, D, but we're still right back at A. They don't want to deliver what the community has discussed at the meetings, and so that's a little perplexing to me. And then saving the trees and the green space. But I also think with the urbanization, in some ways, because we are a county, it needs to be more like village center, not city center. I mean, if you go to Colorado Springs, or you go to in different places in Canada or in Europe, it doesn't have to look like a giant city to have a central functioning area. It can have a feel of a small village versus this huge, kind of like what they're doing down in Occoquan. I mean, the building, the idea, the concept is wonderful, but it needs to fit into that cottage feel, not like it's on, you know, in Georgetown or Shirlington or somewhere in the center city. It has to fit the area. But anyway, those are just a couple, you know, thoughts. As we think urban is good, but we're also county. And if people want to live in the city, they can go live in the city. They want to live in Tysons, they can go live in Tysons. We're different, we're unique, and we don't have to turn in to those areas to make.
Yeah, I don't disagree with
special.
you, Lori. I think I think the county needs to decide, you know, what their typology and their form is. And all of this presentation where I'm talking about more density, you know, there's nothing compared to like being down in, you know, New York City or Chicago and the kind of densities they have there. So I think each county, each city, each town in Virginia has to decide what their own typology is and what they hope to see from a density perspective. I've seen the earlier version of that sector plan. There's some good stuff in it, and there's some stuff I've kind of questioned. But let me ask you this: when you asked the developer why couldn't they provide the sort of town square type piece, what was the response? They couldn't afford it?
Cost, yeah, cost.
Yeah.
When we said, hey, can you put like a little, you know, a pavilion or something down here so we can have farmers markets and we can have community events, it was almost like an aghast, like, oh my gosh, I can't like have that much space sitting there not occupied with something that's going to bring in money.
Who's the developer? Who is it?
Joe Jacobs.
Yeah, Joe, would you like to say a few words?
Is he here?
Yep.
I invited him. Hi, Joe.
We're glad to have you here, taking Tom's advice right before you even end the program of talking to everybody. So any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I would, if you want, I will, can you hear me?
Yes, and we're glad you're here.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would disagree with Lori's comments, and not surprisingly, but she's not characterized the process nor the plan accurately. And so there is a green space, there are courtyards in the current plan near the commercial areas where they should be, or where I believe they should be. And I did not tell Lori or anyone else that there was an issue with cost. So I'm not sure where that came from, but we have a plan that, quite frankly, follows the small area plan. But and here's a question for Tom then. The county created the small area plan. I guess if he felt that Ray's regard at 5.8 dwelling units was what he called, I think, dumb density, the question that you might want to ask Tom, or I would ask Tom, I guess, is in the small area plan for Independent Hill, would he consider 4 to be dumber?
Well, I don't know what the area plan for Rays Regard was. My recollection was I got there in 1988, and from 1988 until 2000, when I left, the Rays Regard site was identified for 15, 16 units per acre, high density SRH. So if there was a comprehensive plan change between that and when Rays Regard happened, yeah, I think you got a point. But my guess was it was still designated SRH, and it was done because it made sense there. And as it regard to the small area plan, I don't know enough about the small area plan for Independent Hill. I guess that was a community process where they figured out what the right density was. I don't think 5, 6, 8 units per acre is a dumb density if it's out at the edge of the rural area. I do think it's dumb density if you're right next to I-95 and probably the largest single commuter parking lot in Prince William County and in the I-95 corridor. So it's a different question, Joe. I don't know enough about the small area plan for that area. I think the area down near Independent Hill, and I know it pretty well. I don't live that far from it, and I go and get crabs down there all the time, and I go to that park all the time. I think that could be a very cute, very interesting little village with some density that acts as sort of a crossroads style village. And I would hope that's what the area plan said. Did the area plan call for 8 or 10 or 15 units per acre?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Martin, you got a comment?
Yes, thanks, Tim. Thanks, Tom. Great presentation. Martin Jeter, Mid-County Civic Association. Yeah, the small area plan called for a range of housing as they usually do. So it was a range of, I believe, 45 housing units to a high of 200 housing units is what small area plan calls for. Joe's plan is a little bit over that. I think, Joe, yours is around 225, I believe. So it's above the maximum recommended in the small area plan, but the median was around 150 or so. So yeah, I mean, the trade-off is always what the community wants as far as density and what the developer can provide as far as amenities. And the community has to make a decision in all these cases. And this one's a perfect example of how much intensity they want. And the intensity, obviously, Joe can't build a project with a lot of different shops and, higher end things and all that kind of stuff, open areas, without that density. So the community needs to decide what's going to be acceptable to us. And during the small area plan process, the Board of County Supervisors in the community came up with that range. So anywhere from 45 to 200 and a median of around 150, 160. So we're not quite there yet as far as density goes to that median level. But the other thing is you made a great point, Tom. It depends on where the project is. I mean, if it's around transit, yeah, we should go to the higher end of that density. We should go to the projects like you mentioned over there on the eastern end. I would mention though that the Courts project, I understand you think that's a pretty good one and it should be even more dense. I personally would question that because of the transit issue, because it's not close to any kind of reasonable transit. And that project, when it's completed on both sides of the parkway there, the one area is not actually planned out yet, but it will be planned and part of that whole overall project. You're talking about over 30,000 vehicle trips per day that'll be fed into that intersection. So, that's going to be a big. I mean, they have that intersection improvement planned already, and I think it's fairly funded. It's going to take out some of those stores you talked about on the sides there, that TGI or whatever that is, Fridays or whatever it is. That I think that's going to have to go because it's in the way of the intersection improvements. But in any case, even with those improvements, that's going to be a tough one there with all those vehicle trips per day. So yeah, I mean, the area where the project is huge, and Independent Hill is not in the transit area or anything like that, as you mentioned. So, but thanks a lot. Great program.
You have follow-up comments, Tom?
No. I think I wasn't necessarily calling for significantly more density there, Martin. I was just saying that the design is such that it gives it a feel of of a suburban parking lot, and moving some of the units, moving some of the shops and the offices and the retail up on the road and sort of surrounding the parking, so the parking's not as visible from Minnieville and from the Parkway makes a lot more sense to me. I think what they have along the Parkway where the lake is, I think that's pretty cool, and that gives a real sense of what's happening. But my feeling is what you see in drawings and what you actually get on the ground is very different. And Jack and I can, how many times did we go and say, here's what they said, and then here's what they actually built? It's a big deal. But I think what you said is important. This is the difference between, quote, the development area and the rural area. And that piece at Independent Hill is at the edge of the development area. It's in a small area plan, not looking at the same kind of, density there. But I do sympathize with Joe that if you can get the kinds of retail and service and shops and the kinds of feel that gives it a sort of village look, and you can do it, that's you got to have more, you got to have more units to do that. And I'm not encouraging, I'm just saying it's understandable they're going to go for the higher end of the density. But maybe there's other typologies that they can consider. Maybe they can get someone to come in, and maybe Joe can find someone who can build a whole bunch of cottage units, and it would look kind of cool. And I think that when I was talking about the rural area at some of my last presentations, one of the things that's going to be very attractive to the folks who are, I would call the X generation now, the people that are the end of the millennials and not the Z yet, as they get to families and they get to school, they're going to be looking at schools and things like that, as they're going to be looking for a place that may have a more dense feel to it, but still is not urban, not city feel to it. And maybe Independent Hill is the place for that. I can see 200 units down there. I think that, could make some sense.
Jack.
Yes, I just wanted to report at the local Pelt meeting when we had Joe Jacobs make his presentation. We did have some dialogue on housing choice and workforce housing. Those topics came up. And I would say when one draws the concentric circles around Independent Hill, and you look at the choices that currently exist, it doesn't have that diversity of housing choices. Now, I know Margaret Franklin and Kenny Bodie are having a town hall Wednesday evening on housing choices and looking for workforce housing and other venues of that sort that provide that choice and that diversity in housing. So but again, the placement of where those housing choices should be is an issue as well. But I would say that the Pelt Committee did comment and observe the need for providing choices in the Independent Hill area for teachers and the workforce housing in that community. They did see that need.
David, you asked a question about sustainability. It's a long question. Do you want to share your thoughts yourself?
I guess my question is, I've heard the term sustainability thrown around a lot, especially in regards to the upcoming 2021-2024 strategic plan. And I went to dictionaries trying to find a good definition. And one I found was an organizational focus on activities that provide present benefit without compromising the needs of future generations. And I'm just interested in how is the concept of sustainability being defined and folded into this Prince William County strategic plan is in work? Because I think there's a lot of different definitions of this term going around, and I'm just a little confused by what everyone is meaning by that.
Oh, I'm not going to answer that question because I'm going to answer it with a sort of non-answer, which is, yeah, I've worked in planning for a long time. I think I may have written the first word of the word sustainability back when it was sort of really popular, and but there's as many definitions as you can imagine. I do believe there's a definition in the current comprehensive plan of what do we mean by sustainability, and that's where I would go to find that out. I think generally speaking, that what you mentioned is right. You don't want to, take current benefit at the expense of future benefit that you could get. It's interesting that so much of the planning literature revolves around the word sustainability and what that means and how it's interpreted. Is it economic sustainability? Is it environmental sustainability? Is it, cultural sustainability? I think when we wrote the comprehensive plan, the first version in its current form back in 1994 under Doug James, the word sustainability was primarily referring to environmental sustainability. I know that that's changed since then, and certainly in the 98 plan, it was different. It was also about economic sustainability. But yeah, I don't know how to answer that question. It's sort of like, what does the word God mean? It's a big one. It's a big one, but I think it's important. Jack, I believe there is a definition actually in the comprehensive plan for that.
So Tom, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
What role does green open space play in reviving communities and ensuring their long-term environmental sustainability? And how can that be accomplished in older areas, say Marumsco, or older areas without enough?
Well, I mean, in a very general sense, if you look at just the issue of, why do people build next to golf courses? Why do they build next to parks? The added value and the amount of money that you pay for a unit that has either view of or is adjacent to, that for years that's been an issue, which is they build value. They certainly do. And they're one of the few things that government actually builds that actually builds value, that along with schools. But when you do a redevelopment of a single family area, that's tough. That's one of the more difficult things to do unless you have the ability to go in and acquire and consolidate properties. And so, we talk now, Marumsco Plaza or Featherstone Plaza might be one that has 5 or 6 property owners that you could look at the 2 buildings and then the outbuilding and then the parcel where the gas station is and maybe the one behind it that has some of the green space. When you're dealing with 5 or 6 property owners, that's a doable thing if you have someone who's motivated to acquire those properties. But, a typical thing that happens when that happens is the old owner comes and says, oh, someone wants to buy this property up, just went up 200%, And so it's a difficult task for developers to do. But it's possible. When you're dealing with hundreds of homeowners, that's tough. And the rehab and the revitalization of drainage systems and daylighting drainage systems, to put in green space, to add green space. Yeah, I mean, we're putting pipes in, Marumsco Hills and Marumsco Woods for years and years and years, and we should be daylighting them. And then it's like, okay, what's the liability issue as the kids slip in there and drown? And, all of those issues are going to come up. But value is added by green space. There's no question in my mind. I mean, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of economic studies that show what the value of green space is. But the real issue here is also connectivity. Right now it's hard for me to get on Route 1 and walk down to, there's no direct route to get right to Veterans Park, right? Go down to Featherstone Road, take a left, go down, or you can go across the bridge that's down there. But the interconnectivity of pathways and trails and trail systems, especially in this day and age of the scooter and the electric bike, as well as, just hand pedaled bikes, it's tremendous. And all over the country in the urban areas where, and I would say it this way, in the affluent, rich areas of cities, those trail systems are in place and they're heavily used, and they can add tremendous value to property. So.
Thank you.
One of the strategic things we should be looking at is connectivity of our green space. So
Absolutely.
it really is really important to do that. And also to, I would say, upgrade our infrastructure for stormwater management, et cetera. You know, that's all part of it. And also focusing on bundling utilities so we maximize the green space as much as possible. So that means getting all the utilities to talk to one another.
Right.
To do that. That would be good. And Martin had his hand up 2 or 3 times. I know he wanted to say something.
I always got something to say, Jack. I
Yes.
just wanted to go back to Mr. Peterson's question there earlier about the strategic plan and sustainability. Rick Berry's in the meeting here. He and I were both on a strategic plan committee, or are both on a strategic plan committee, and we both helped to develop the environmental protection and this sustainable growth areas as strategic plan. So what we were working with as a definition was basically what's sustainable environmentally, what's sustainable as far as traffic and congestion and that kind of thing goes, what's sustainable for the quality of life in Prince William County and protecting that, and those kind of things. So it was about what's sustainable financially as far as Prince William County, what can we afford in the near future. So keep in mind, the strategic plan is a 4-year plan. So we were looking at fairly near future, but those are the things we were looking at as far as sustainability. And Rick can jump in there if he wants. He was actually, I think, the lead on the sustainable growth section.
Martin, you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Oh, that's it? No comments?
Actually, I wanted to ask Tom a question. I think it's really important when I hear you talk about how we make our development areas really special and really pop in a 21st century way that attracts talent and also attracts new businesses. Because one thing that you have to recognize that sets us apart from Pittsburgh are these great corporations that are coming to supply the jobs, because we want to keep more people here so that they drive less and can walk to work, and we make true live, work, and play communities. So part of that is how we market Prince William County, right? And part of that is looking like we're 21st century. And what I hear you describing is 21st century kinds of development that will attract this new generation. But that fits into smart growth. So I think it would be important to maybe just encapsulate what smart growth means, because I also hear that encapsulated in what Martin described as sustainability. So I'm weaving us back to the Rural Crescent, but only in the broader sense of—
No, Elena, that's a good question. So today's meeting, I had to define sustainability and smart growth, the 2 terms that I would never want to try to explain to anybody. But no, I think you're right. And just on your point about employment versus chasing the talent, the employment is going to where the talent is now. It used to be the other way around. From the beginning of the United States, you would go to get your job where the work was. Well, now these corporations, the Ubers, the Googles, the Microsofts, all of them, even the robotics and the small like startup entrepreneurials, they are locating based on where the talent is. And when someone says, my son says, oh, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh, and well, what job do you have? Well, I don't have a job. I'm just going to go up to Pittsburgh. You go up to Pittsburgh, they find jobs, and it really is important. So when you talk about presenting ourselves as, here's what Prince William is, think about it in both ways. You're attracting and retaining talent, and you're doing economic development at the same time. That's the way it happens. I don't know if I can tell you what the most current version of smart growth is. I would encourage you to talk to Calvin Gladney. He is the executive director of Smart Growth America. Great guy, big ULI person. I've worked with him on a lot of stuff. He probably has the most recent version of it, but I think all of it kind of fits together. And another word that I won't define, and hopefully no one will try to do it, but resilience, sustainability, smart growth, all of those go together. It's all about doing the right thing and spending taxpayers' money as well as private investment in the places where it should be spent, and thinking about the long term as opposed to the short term gain. So I don't know if that answers your question, Elena, but I just wanted to say that.
Guys, it mostly answers. I mean, my concern now is we seem to be heading towards the worst part of Loudoun County and their data center development, which is not future forward thinking. And then the worst parts of, I think, overdevelopment of housing in Fairfax County or other places where they've sacrificed their green spaces, where Prince William, I keep saying this, holds this unique sweet spot of, we can just pass this AAOD where we're supposed to be really highlighting our rural economy, and yet you can drive 10, 20 miles down the road and be in a more suburban or 30 miles more urban area on the very east. And we actually encapsulate not only, you know, I think Virginia, but in some ways the entire United States in the diversity of what we can offer. And I'm afraid that we're going to mess it all up in this very juvenile sort of, you know, everything now, not thinking about the impacts later on, and how we market the uniqueness of that in Prince William County. You know, somebody might have stolen Kim's tagline, I won't say who she is, but from the Potomac shore to the Bull Run Mountains. And that also encapsulates not only our diversity in population, but our topography and the rural economy as opposed to a more urban economy. And my fear is that we're on the precipice of screwing all that up.
Yeah, we need to celebrate our diversity here in Prince William County. So we need to recognize these treasures that we have and not make it look like any other place. That would be, then why would people have a reason to come here if we mess that up? It's really,
That's my favorite line from the guy from the Conservation Fund.
yes, and it's true. It's true.
If every place looks the same, there's no reason to go anywhere.
Yeah, I think along those lines, we need to be careful when we talk about the development area and the rural area. The Mid-County area is the greenest and most environmentally sensitive part of the county. And, you know, we don't want to use this broad brush approach and say everything goes in the development area, because, you know, in reality, the Mid-County area is probably the most important area we need to protect for the watershed and for, you know, the amount of tree cover and the wildlife corridors over to Fairfax County to the park area on that side. So, you know, we just need to be careful about this development area language and not just use a broad brush and, you know, everything goes in the development area. That's what I hear a lot. So just, we should think about that, I hope.
I think what is missing from all of this planning talk is the fact that we are facing a climate crisis. And I think all planning has to be done from the point of view of the climate crisis. And therefore, you would know that you can't pave everything over, that you have to be very careful with your water. You only have to read about what's happening in the West. We do not live in the same world we lived in, and we don't have time to be pussyfooting around. And what we are up against here, Thomas, is a bunch of people who think nothing about changing our very way of life. Somebody coming and saying you should be on sewers and not a well. That's my drinking water. So we are up against not a government, we are up against corruption that is just so vast and so awful. So it's a real battle here. And I think we have to keep pushing on the fact that we want to do the things that are best for the environment, make the environment sustainable, change the building, that if you're going to allow a data center here, it has to be a sustainable data center. And that means two things. They generate their own electricity, or they use only renewable energy, okay, and they reuse their water. That would make Prince William County a really special place, and all of these young people that you're talking about would want to come and live in a place where the environment is our number one concern, and they would want to be here. And that would make a very good selling point.
And there's a question in the chat box, Tom, on the relationship of data centers and how that fits into smart growth.
Well,
Yeah, sorry.
are we talking data centers in the rural area? Or are we talking data centers where they were meant to go? I mean, that'd be that's the question I would have.
I think beyond the rural area, but not necessarily where they were meant to go.
I mean, I looked at some of the information regarding the study that they did about, they have to have 30 acres and there's a lot of undevelopable stuff. I question, again, I haven't read through all of it. I just got that early last week or late last week. And I question the assumptions that they used about why property wasn't available and we needed to go into the rural area. I mean, my quick look, and I don't know, I could go back and probably do an analysis. It would take me several weeks to do to look at property owners and so forth, but there is more than enough acreage in the development area. And Martin, I'm not talking about, the SRR and, the stuff around the Occoquan. I'm talking about the stuff out in the Linton Hall and the Wellington and the ARC property in its own right, or property south of the Jiffy Lube Center and stuff out at the edge of Gainesville and the triangle out there. There's just an enormous amount of acreage that's available. And what the real issue here is, a few property owners have figured out that they can make this a case for an economic case and an equity case. And I just think it's a red herring. There's more than enough land in the development area to accommodate the current growth. I would also put on the economic development director and the county executive and the board of supervisors the question of, what's the likelihood that 10 years from now, they're going to need data centers as big as they're looking at, and that these aren't going to become big white elephants that are sitting out there. I'm stunned at the people that opposed Disney and the mall and all of the stuff that I went through back and that aren't out now saying this is going to ruin, the view sheds and things like that. But I would question, what is the real need for these things? I've been reading about new technologies like you wouldn't believe. Everybody's going to the cloud. Everybody's going to need storage, but everybody's not going to need a gigantic, 200 foot by 100 foot box that's air conditioned with all this energy needs. I just don't think that's going to be the case. That's what's there now. That's what data centers are. And they're hugely profitable to the county because of the tool tax and because of the certain things we have to tax. But who's to say that's not going to go away very quickly? I mean, they may get down and repeal the tool tax, and then what's the use? It's just a big, ugly, box that sits out there. I don't doubt the need for data centers as we speak right now, but I do doubt the need that there isn't adequate acreage to take care of that. And anybody who's selling that product, whatever it is, I'm not talking about the product, selling that folklore that we don't have enough acreage. I think this group ought to contract with someone like the Piedmont Environmental Council or someone like that and pay them to do the study to do that. I have to say the Urban Land Institute, and I'm not speaking for them in this situation or in any other situation, I just work for them. I don't think the Urban Land Institute would get involved in that kind of study because we don't do contract work like that. But I'm sure there's a consultant out there that could do that kind of study. And again, I would have each of you look very closely at the assumptions they used about why the acreage in the development area can't accommodate what they think the perceived or the proposed growth is for the data centers. I think you will find that there's more than adequate growth. Now, if 10 years from now, they're still building, 600,000 square foot or, 30,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 square foot buildings for data centers, then you probably are at some point going to run out. But I just don't buy it now. It's expensive. That's part of the problem is they can go buy it from Marianne Gadban for a song, and they can't buy the ARC property or some of the stuff down there Wellington Road because it's just not in their price range, and they're looking for a cheap thing. And I think there's this sort of sense that we've got to do something because there's not enough land, and I don't believe it.
Just real quick, Kim, Tom, to your point, Kim and I and some others, the Prince William Conservation Alliance hosted a tour of the Iron Mountain Data Center, and we were told during the tour that the lifespan of that data center is 15 years. So
why are you, I'm sorry, but why are they pissing away the future of this county? Because they've got this current need. Yeah, we needed big box retail back in the 90s. Why? It just doesn't make any sense to me, but that's very interesting. I think there's a lot of different other different methods of doing that, and a lot of micro centers are going to come in. They're going to be smaller. I'm not Martin and Jack and I'm not saying that there's not a need for data centers. There is a need for data centers. What I'm saying is, what could possibly motivate someone to put one out in an area that the county has spent a lot of time saying we don't want to see a lot of uses out there? And by the way, the neighbor next door, what's going to keep them from applying for a comprehensive plan amendment to either put in a data center or some other use, using as the justification, well, you got this thing right next door to me with the electric lines and the sewer lines and all that with it. It becomes a slippery slope when you've got a huge use like that. If you were putting, something like, hay storage or something like that, it wouldn't become the precursor for everybody around them to say, I also need hay storage. It certainly would, but I don't know. To me, I think you guys need to look at that and not accept for a fact that the assumptions that the Economic Development Department and the Planning Office made on the availability of land is what it is. I could dig into it further if I could find the time to do it, but this all is available on GIS information in the county tax, and you could hire someone to do that. You can find a consultant. You'd have to find a consultant that wouldn't be put out to pasture because they did a study like that. That's going to be a task in its own right. But
Tom, I have a comment based on your reputation issue, and I think it's important. If the county wants to change its image, we have two big possibilities for improving our image. One would be George Mason University Annex. And if we could get them involved in environmental issues and green issues and develop this as a center for that. We already have a landfill that people come from far and wide to emulate. And there are other things we're doing in that category, and we could expand upon that with the environmental issues we're dealing with. Another is that Inova and some of their medical facilities, if we could get a medical hospital or something associated with George Mason and build up that type, we could improve our education in this area and create more jobs locally so people don't have to travel outside of the county. That's all I have.
Yeah, I think the medical school is going to be tough. I think UVA and VCU or the Medical College of Virginia have got lock hold of that, because I know Tech looked at that and James Madison looked at that. I think that's the environmental thing. On the other hand, that might be, I don't know what the programs are at George Mason. There's so many specialties now and renewables and things like that.
Yeah.
That could be something that would be out there.
Yeah. We have the Marine Sciences Center down at Belmont Bay too.
Yeah.
So that's a nice little node. Yeah,
I think George Mason is there's property around George Mason. I know it's a lot spoken for. I know eventually they've got a quarry that's going to be filled in over there, and they're going to have to figure out how to use that. And maybe you can put a bunch of data centers down in the quarry. I think one of the other things is what I said about Pittsburgh is awfully true about the universities. They are drivers. They are drivers of industry, and the research money that comes out of the federal grants and so forth. you can look at universities around the country and you can see they were at a certain size, and then they went and looked at getting federal money for their programs, and they became a medium sized research institution, and then they became a large research institution. And some of that happened over just decades, not 3 or 30 or 40 or 50 years, but 10 or 20 years. And so George Mason could be a great look there. The only thing with that is they've got their feet in the ground up in Fairfax, and what they want to put down at the Prince William Annex is, I don't know what their plans are, and maybe the county can get involved there and say, listen, what can we do to have you consider you remember, Kim, I think back when Jack just mentioned Belmont Bay. How did we get the Science Museum of Virginia to open up something there? That was not an easy process. It was a difficult, long, hard road, but it happened. Finally, it happened, and it's going to eventually get better and better. So, that's definitely something worth looking at. See what you can get.
We'll see. There's all issues over there now about what to do with the golf course.
Yeah. The one that was never going to go away, and don't worry, there's not going to be any more density there.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I have to admit, on that one, I was involved in Belmont so much that, if any place could have some density, that might be one place you could do it, but it would have to be offset with a lot of controls being that close to the river. But gosh, the train station's there, right? And if you're going to have any place that gets some density, that would be a place to do it.
We got.
So I would agree. I got one question, Jacob, about Belmont and the proximity to the train station. There's a huge parcel. There's a gap in between the train station and Belmont that I could never understand why that's there and why it wasn't built all the way up to the train station.
The interchange.
Oh, is that where it's going through? How silly of me. Of course.
Now that interchange at Route 1, when that gets put in and they do the sector plan there for either side of 123, and Jack, I know you've been involved with this too, and
yeah, VDOT's coming to our meeting. There are very serious urban developers up that did the wharf and places like that are very interested in this part of the riverfront. Those are the kind of developers that can come in and really do a good job. And I'm not saying the other developers can't. It's just they have the power to, borrow $500 million and put in something really spectacular. That's what we have to attract. And that's hard to do when there's 20 other sites up and down the river that a group that did the war, like the group that did the war, might be interested in looking at. So, maybe that Belmont piece becomes that, maybe it doesn't, maybe there's another piece in there that you could figure out. I sure wish something would happen. I know that Virginia concrete's important to the economy, but my gosh, what a beautiful piece of land that is. And that could be, that together with the rest of that piece up there could be a real opportunity. And then, then you've got the bridge in the background, the river and the boats, and you've got the, the waterfront restaurants. Those are the kind of things that kids say, hey, this would be a great place to live. And then you start getting a little talent group there that I think becomes so important to economic development.
So how would walkability work up there? Because you have the Checky buildings, you have Belmont, you have the train station, but now you have a road.
Well, I'm not worried about the road. They'll figure out how to get across and around and all that stuff. The bigger issue is what do you do with Virginia concrete? So you don't have to go up to, what's the name of the drive there? I keep forgetting.
Annapolis Way?
Yeah, Annapolis Way. How do you not have to go up there? How do you get along the river? That kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, Kim, Bill McDowell. We're looking at VDOT and reacting to VDOT's flyover of Route 1 with 123. And if you look at it from one perspective, you've got the Woodbridge, Northern Woodbridge small area plan where they have that whole new town center planned out across where, say, Food Line all the way across 123 to the other side as an open, active town center. And if you were to drop that 123 flyover there, what you've created is dropping a mixing bowl like in the middle of Springfield. And it's going to break up that town center from one standpoint, but it's also going to create a whole lot of issues with the residential on the north side of Belmont Bay as it comes in. You spoke about a parcel of land between the VRE and where that flyover was. Our latest information is the developers have plans for a set of apartments or other type of residences going into that parcel.
Yeah, we'll be at the local appellate meeting this coming Thursday night. VDOT's coming in to explain the transportation options all along Route 1, 123, Occoquan Road, 123 and Old Bridge Road. There's half a dozen VDOT folks coming to the meeting.
Yeah,
and
we had
on Zoom. Yes.
We had a meeting with them about, a couple of weeks ago. They came in for our community and had a kind of an open town hall meeting and presented
Yes.
4 different plans to us. And I know they've got a series of meetings of that, as well as the other 2 interchanges there at, Old Bridge Road and at 95.
Yes. So we're having at least 8 or 10 transportation specialists coming to the meeting Thursday night, at the Zoom meeting, and you're welcome to join us.
Okay, thank you.
Bill has been active in trying to protect some green open space down at Belmont.
Yeah. You had mentioned George Mason, and the golf course there. We had a group look at the golf course as a possibility of getting the land from the developers at a couple of parcels at the golf course. And in both working with Belmont Bay Elementary and George Mason, through that context, Mason was all over trying to help us build out native meadows in one of those parcels. So they're very actively now involved with helping the community and helping, what their whole mission and vision is there at the Potomac Science Center.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Hopefully that comes to pass.
Yeah, it's going to still be some road up the hill on that one, though.
Thanks for sharing, Bill.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have comments, questions? Lots of developments, lots of stuff going on in Prince William County, that's for sure.
Let me just say thanks very much, everybody. I appreciate it. I just want to encourage you guys, let's not forget about Route 1 and 234 in the developed areas. There's so much that can happen there. And if you guys stay involved, I think better things will happen.
I had a little question. Excuse
yes,
me,
ma'am.
Eitler. I don't know if this is the right venue for this, but talking about getting the local colleges involved in studies. There was a previous meeting that we talked about getting VCU or George Mason doing a water study. Have all the colleges and universities around been explored to do any of these kind of studies as maybe it's part of their student interns? Just a thought.
Yeah, I would think tech would be probably the one. Well, George Mason, but I think tech is the one that does a lot of that. They run the Occoquan monitoring lab. I think they would be the people to coordinate with. You might talk to the people at the Occoquan monitoring lab, even though that's a surface water undertaking. Any kind of are you talking about groundwater or surface water?
I think we're talking about groundwater. This is a meeting a few months ago. I can't remember exactly. I'm just talking about engaging the services of our local colleges for a small fee or maybe nothing. Just an idea.
Yeah, George Mason or Tech would probably be the people to go to. I'm sure all the universities, their geology programs have it. Tech just seems to have the I don't know what you would call it, the horsepower to do that kind of stuff. And because they've got the Occoquan monitoring lab and they coordinate, with the university down there, they're probably the best bet. But all the universities have, geology departments, and I don't know who does those kind of studies at the moment, but Tech would be my first stop, and then maybe George Mason.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom, a quick question. I worked at Cisco for many years and fairly familiar with the data centers and let's just say the half-life of information technology, as it were, right? Are you able to, in your review, predict the longevity of data centers as they currently established?
Well,
You kind of brought
no,
up that point, right?
it's a good question. It's a really good question. I think you get as many, it's sort of like the sustainability question. There's as many definitions of that. I was trying to do some research on that, and people are talking about, and these are 2019 articles talking about, are data centers dead, question mark. And clearly they're not. But no, I don't have a definitive answer in that regard, but it requires some more study. I think that is worth looking at. Is the data center phenomenon really a real estate development, money-making operation for a real estate approach to things, or are the data center needs so intense right now that they just need that much more land? And it's not clear from the county's work that they did any discussion about, they just were told, here's how much you're going to have. And, there is a certain level of, when you're doing economic development, you want to have, if you have to have 100 acres over the next 10 years, you want to have 300 acres available, because you want to be able to give a lot of options to people. So there's some of that involved. But yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I don't know who to talk to. I guess I could do some inquiries about, data centers and where they stand. There's a few people on this phone call that probably could answer that question better than I can. Is Roll Band still on somewhere? Mike, are you still on? He's not. And there's others that in the Northern Virginia area probably could answer that question, but I can talk to Kim and we can see what we can do about, what that is. I think there's not going to be a definitive answer there about the amount of square footage or the amount of acreage that would be consumed over a 10-year period on that, because there's so many assumptions that come into it, which is why I say that the assumptions that the county made about, well, there's not enough land is, that's one opinion. What's the other opinion, or the other 10 opinions that might be out there about what you actually need? I think the bigger question needs to be answered. But I think the other question that needs to be answered is that it? Is that what you're looking for? Is that what you want to be? If you want to be, the data center of Northern Virginia, or, the Washington, D.C. area, then, I have a feeling that's how our county staff might be thinking about it, as we want to be known as the data center area of Northern Virginia. But, what are you going to do after 25 years and you've got these gigantic buildings sitting out there? You think warehouses are tough to reuse, or retail? Try using a data center for something other than a data center. It's going to be tough. Maybe the military could come in and use them for something, but again, it's one of those things that they're huge single purpose buildings. They're not meant for, maybe they turn them into hangars. They're very solid, right? They got issues and things like that. But
we might have some blue sky discussions about alternate uses of data centers as they become obsolete.
The one we were in, the whole thing was made out of concrete.
Yeah, no, they're very solid. Vibrations are a big deal.
Right.
Which is why I mentioned to you, Kim, I wonder about any data centers being located so close to Triassic Basin and down where Quantico is because of vibrations, but maybe they've worked that out. Maybe they've got some kind of shock absorbers in place. But, if you continue to have the 155 and 105 millimeter stuff shooting some distance back from Quantico, you're going to have to deal with vibrations, because they get worried about railroads and things like that.
Right.
But again, I've been talking to, someone was talking about, can we do a 2-story, 3-story, or 4-story, or high-rise data centers? And people are thinking, well, that's possible. I don't know how, but that's in the, that's worth a discussion. Finding an expert that can help the Conservation Alliance talk about data centers from a knowledgeable perspective. I can talk about warehouses and storage facilities all day, but data centers are a very special thing.
Actually, we already have a proposal for a 7-story data center. I think Village Place or whatever it was last week. It was approved by the board. 7 stories.
Wow, where's that? Where's Village Place?
Oh, Kim, help me out. It's over.
Haymarket.
Yeah.
It's at the corner of Cat Harpin and John Marshall Highway, talking about mixed use and affordable work, live and play.
Right.
They rezoned Village Place that was supposed to be condos, apartments, townhomes,
Affordable housing.
affordable housing,
Yeah.
and retail and commercial, this really cool place like they have in Gainesville over by Atlas, and they rezoned it for very large 70-foot tall data centers, but that's only on one corner. The other two corners will have a mirror image of those data centers, so that entire gateway into the cute town of Haymarket will be industrial blight.
All to the sacrifice of the
Yes.
god of the data centers. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's a board decision. The board needs to be heard. You know, they need to do something on that.
They designed the exterior to look like an office building, but small
With
console.
no windows.
Yes.
Well, I don't know how they're gonna cover up the transmission line in the substation. That should be interesting how they try and camouflage that.
Well, they
Okay.
found some development area available for data centers. It's not like it's not there. So not that that's any consolation, you know.
No, not for that, but there's areas that are much more industrial
Yeah,
looking.
yeah.
They also, the areas they say aren't available for data center approval is because they've been, you know, we have this scalping situation going on where developers are buying up the land that is in the overlay district and then trying to sell it back for $1 million an acre. And so the industry is going, well, we'll go over here where they don't know where we're going to buy. And so that's why they're saying they don't have space, because they don't want to pay the $1 million an acre. There's plenty of available space in the overlay district. Plenty.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Crimea River for the data centers and the developers, if they've scalped up the stuff, you know, and so who suffers from that? The image of the county suffers, and we go out to the rural area, and now we have to start rezoning land out there, and all the efforts and all the blood, sweat, and tears that go along with big changes to comprehensive plans and rezonings. They're all going to be focused out there. And in the meantime, the Route 1 quarter, the 234 quarter, all of that sits vacant and idle, and nobody's looking at it. No one's trying to do anything with it because we're all worried about what we're doing out in the rural area. It's amazing. Okay, folks, thank you very much.
I was just going to say, we need to end on a happier note.
Yes. Well,
don't worry,
thank you for
it'll all
hosting.
get worked out. No, that's not it. But I hope you guys let me know what I can do. I'll talk to Kim about data centers and if there's any sort of place that we can go to get more information on that.
Thanks, Tom, and thanks for a great presentation.
Okay, thank you.
A really productive community
Thank you, everyone.
conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Tom. It's terrific.
Thank you.